Welcome to the Old Swan in Netherton, otherwise known as Ma Pardoes. I started working here first in 1977 for Mrs Pardoes. She died in 1984 and it was all sold. I took the licence over in 1985 and was here for 2 years. In that 2 years, the properties next door were converted into the lounges, pretty well as they are today. And then I moved on to take on other pubs in Netherton. And I watched this place go steadily downhill until eventually it closed in March 2000. The existing building was built in 1865 and stopped pretty well unaltered until 1985 when it was sold, and then the two properties next door were converted into what's now the lounge. Behind me stood the statue of one of Netherton's famous sons, Joe Derby, and he rests here in Netherton churchyard, just a stone's throw from where Mrs Pardoes lies. There are 3 entrances to the pub. This is the main entrance to the old bar. This is the smoke room at the Old Swan. I always think that this is the best room in the pub. When I started drinking here first in 1977, this is where I used to sit, and there were 2 old ladies that used to sit here. The one has only just passed away this year, at the age of 99. We currently brew 4 beers. There's the original, which is 3.5%. There's the Dark Swan at 4.2, Entire at 4.4, and Bumblehole at 5.2. All brewed in the brewery at the back, as it should be.
Look, we're at Ma Pardoes Brewery, 6 o'clock in the morning. This is how we start our day. The brewery's at the back of the Old Swan Inn in Netherton. The first thing I've got to do is mash in, check the water temperature first, let some water in. 68 degrees. This is just what we want. There you go. Now this slide lets the grain come down. And that's the end of the grain, so we finish mashing in.
The reason that the pub survived is Mrs Pardoes didn't own it. She rented it up until the 60s. The landlords wouldn't spend any money on it because they couldn't see a good enough return on it. And Mrs Pardoes wouldn't spend any money because it wasn't hers. So nothing was changed. I mean, it hasn't survived because the people have loved it and wanted to keep it. It's survived out of neglect. I negotiated with Punch Taverns, who are the owners of the property, and took the tenancy on in the November 2000, and then set about restoring it, if you can call it that, back to its former glory. People have given me a lot of credit for doing the work here, and I haven't done it. All I've done is created a set of conditions. It's Netherton people that have made the pub. They drink in it, they use it, and they keep it going.
With this being a small brew, I'm going to put the spa jar in straight away.
There were 2 cottages that were converted into a pub, and they used to run at 90 degrees to where the pub is running now. In the 1860s, the Earl of Dudley, bless him, removed the coal from underneath the properties in Netherton. Netherton sank about 30 feet, and all had to be rebuilt.
Right, we start off by weighing the brew out, ready for the process, which means we fetch the bags out the grain store. Depending on what brew it is, depends on how much grain and what different types of grain we use. Make sure the top copper's full of water and get that hot ready for the brew. Mixture of different grains. We got roast barley at the bottom. That's oat malt, crystal malt, torrefied wheat, chocolate malt, and the pale malt. These are the pale malt. Got 7 bags of these. And these are 2 lighter grains, torrefied wheat and the crushed oats. Now that's all torrefied wheat in there, so this is oat malt. That's different again. Get more husks in this one. And then some more pale malt. And keep on mixing it through that way. All done.
In 1830, the Duke of Wellington, then Prime Minister, altered the legislation that enabled anybody to brew beer in the front room, or in the back room rather, and sell it in the front room. In 1862, there were 56,000 homebrew pubs. In 1972, there were 4, and this was one of the 4. The other 3 being 2 in Shropshire and 1 in Cornwall.
And that's sparging nicely. I just need to take the temperature of the water, make sure it's enough for us. Water on the sparge needs to be hotter than the mashed water. Needs to be around about 78. Well, for this brew, it's 2.2 kilo of North Down and 0.9 of East Kent Goldings. So we start off with the North Down. There we go, that's 2.2 of that. And that's 0.9 of the Goldings, which is the late hop.
Into the small word, but still putting into the meadow wolf banner.
Yeah.
That's a million, so 0 from the
This room is one of 4 rooms that were converted and extended in 1986 when the lounges were added to the existing pub. This range isn't really typical of the Black Country ranges. They would have been bigger than this. This is a scullery range, but nevertheless it forms quite a feature. I've had to put this fire guard round. Somebody fell onto the fire. Thank goodness they weren't hurt. It was towards the end of the evening and the fire was virtually out, but it highlighted an issue. We couldn't find a fire guard that was adult proof, so we made this one out of brass tube and fittings. It's quite substantial and does the job.
Not his brain, I'll say so.
This is something you wouldn't find in many public houses. You'll see organs and pianos, but to find a full pedal board. Quite unusual, really. World famous organists have played this instrument on more than one occasion, unto the wee small hours. Good time was had by all. This room is the function room, but we use this as a restaurant. People say, why have a restaurant upstairs? Well, the kitchen's upstairs, which is the main reason, but also if you use this room, that leaves downstairs free for drinkers. I mean, you don't want to be out with the missus on a special occasion, somebody's pinching the chips off your plate, which I have now and happen. So we do the restaurant food upstairs. We apply the same principle in the restaurants as we do in the rest of the pub. Everything is bought in as raw ingredients and made. Ice creams are made, pastries made. They start with flour and fat. They don't have the ready roll stuff. It's all made from scratch. We'll move on now to what some people consider to be the heart and soul of the place, the brewery.
It'll start running off. It's just a matter of opening this big tap. Just a little. Let it run off nice and slow. And it makes you go blind because you can't see a thing once your glasses have steamed up. And that's it, so I'll let that run off now until the mash has dropped so I can put the sparge arm in. You got the dip now with the wort, so I should put the hops in, ready for the boil. Just on the boil now, and as you can see, it'll turn all the hops into the brew. I'll go and lower the volume on the burner now just to keep it a steady boil for an hour. This is the mash oil that they used to use a long time ago, which is the original one which was with the brewery when we moved in. With the equipment we've got, we don't need to use the mash oil now, but just in case we do, we have got one that we've made to do the job just around the corner there, but that is the antique part of the brewery. This is the mash oil that we made to replace the original, just because we don't want to damage the original anymore. And if we do use it, it's just a matter of getting it in there and stirring in the water with the grain. That's the wort now all in the hop back. What I'm going to do now is recirculate, which is get the pump working slowly. So the wort comes through. It's just water that's in the system at the moment coming out. Now it's turned into the wort, so I'll put it back in there. And the idea is, with that now, is It's recirculating, it's taking the wort out the bottom, pumping it round and then back in again. And it draws all the hops down to the bottom, and the hops create a filter, so it filters the beer to a degree. And we'll just leave that like that until he's finished cleaning the copper. Then we can start transferring. We've got 2 burners to start with, yes. The one on the top is for heating the top copper, which is mainly used overnight to get the water to the right temperature to start brewing first thing in the morning. And then we've got the burner down here, which heats up the water in the bottom copper, and it also boils the wort once we've dropped everything out of the mash tun into the copper. This is the yeast we use. This is actually a fresh batch which we just acquired from Norton Brewery. We buy our yeast off them. Then we keep on using it over and over again, and it lasts for about 3 months. Right, he's finished cleaning the copper now, so I can start transferring. Transferring from the hop back now into FV3 in this case. We've got 4 FVs, numbered 1 to 4 obviously. Today we're using FV3. We've got 2 8-barrel fermenters and 2 10-barrel fermenters. And it's just a matter of putting this into the fermenting vessel. And then setting the pump up again. In this case what we've got to do is open that tap to let cold water go through the paraflow that way. Switch the pump on to let the hot wort go that way. And in the process the wort should come down to round about 20 degrees, which we measure with that thermometer. Now with the yeast, it's cold, it's come out of a fridge, and the wort is at the temperature we want it at. So we put some wort in the yeast. And then we'll put that on top of the hop back, warm it up, and as it warms up, it'll grow to the top of the bucket. Then when it starts growing, we can put it into the FV to change the sugar into alcohol. That's fine.
The existing building was built in 1865 and stopped pretty well unaltered until 1985 when it was sold, and then the 2 properties next door were converted into what's now the lounge.
This is just a small boiler that we've acquired from the kitchens. It enables us to brew a small brew, 18-gallon, one-off specials for Christmas and stuff like that, which is quite unique to us, I believe. We'll measure the power out, ready for the brew for tomorrow. And we've got 2 powders, Brewwell A and Brewwell B. And we want 110 grams of each. And the purpose of the powders is simply to harden the water for the brewing process. It's the different saccharometers we use. That one's an all-purpose one. That goes from 0 to 1050, and these, that goes from 10.0 to 10.10, and that goes from 10.10 to 10.20. We skip the 20s, and that goes from 10.30 to 10.40. That's 10.40 to 50, and that's 50 to 60. We use them to calculate the sugar content on the initial brews. If we're doing an original, original will be the yellow one, which is in the 30s. The dark, which we'll be brewing tomorrow, and the entire is in that one in the 40s, and the Bumble Old is the one in the 50s. Obviously, the higher you start with the gravity, the stronger the beer. The malt is from Fawcett's, which is in Yorkshire somewhere, I think. The hops come from over by Malvern. The chemicals we use, we get them from Nottingham. Well, your recipes you stick to religiously, the weights and that. Yeah. You stick to that. And the way you get consistency really is to get your temperatures right. Well, that's the end of the brewing process for today. So the next thing we got to do is prepare for tomorrow. And we do that by lighting the burner on the top copper. So open the tap. Get a flame going. Well, the first thing we do in the morning is light the bottom burner to get the auxiliary water hot. This burner will now be on for around about an hour just to get the water hot enough for sparging. It hasn't always been gas, it used to be coal fired at one stage. We believe this frame used to be for a winch to get the coal into the burner.
Mrs Pardoes moved to the Old Swan in 1934 after being in the British Oak for a short time. She didn't like it at the British Oak, but she did like it here. She was here for 50 years until 1984, her death. Mr Pardoes died in 1952 and left Mrs Pardoes to run the pub. In fact, she got 7 off licences and 4 pubs. This was treated as the central depot really. Everything was delivered here and then shared out amongst the pubs and off licences according to what they wanted. The off licences went into decline really as the supermarkets started to steal everybody's trade. And then there was a renewed enthusiasm for homebrewed beers.
What I've got to do now is to measure how much liquor we got in here so we know how much we got to rack later on, and we got to get it to the right gravity that we require for this brew. And this is Bumble Old, which is 1052. So I start off by stirring it. Make sure everything's mixed in nicely. Stir it up, take a sample. There we go and measure it. Make sure all the bubbles are off the saccharometer, otherwise it floats in the wrong place. And that is a reading of 1054. 18.5, it's an adjustment of 0.3. To get to 52 is add some water until we get to the right gravity. This is just fetching the remainder beer out of the temperator and that's pumping it across with water. 34. Take it up to 32 and see. You can go in here. 10 18s, and I think you've got about 16 9s. To start with, you have to put finings adjunct in, which is this clear liquid we got here. And it takes a quarter of a pint, a half pint rather, per barrel. So the 18s just have a quarter. And this just helps to start the clearing process of the beer. Once you've got the finings in, you've got this pipe connected to the bottom of the fermenting vessel. Just put that in the tub and open the tap. With the 36, it'll take round about 2 minutes to fill. We only have barrels in the pub, we don't sell barrels out. There's a couple of reasons for that. A lot of the pubs wouldn't be able to cope with selling barrels, and it's transportation as well. Stretch, we go out to the Swan at Brood, the other side of Wolverhampton, and going in the other direction we got the Seven Stars at Ledbury. So it's a fair area we cover, and that one's full. Well, this particular brew is a 10-barrel brew, and so it's 10 of those, and 36 in one of those, so it's 360 gallon. We normally brew 2 10-barrel brews and 1 8-barrel brew. So that's 28 barrels a week normally. Occasionally we do 4, depending on stocks. Yeah. A 9 is 9 gallon. 18 is double that, which is 18 gallon, and the 36 is the big one, which is the actual barrel size. The 36 gallon is a barrel. Half of it is for us and half of it's for sale out, which says a lot for the amount of beer that they sell in the pub, to be honest. We've got the 4 main beers that we brew: the original, the Entire, the Bumble Ale, and the Dark. We do 3 a week, so we do an original, an Entire, and a Dark. Original, Entire, and Bumble Ale, and then the Dark, because it's a mild and it's not as popular as it used to be, we only need to brew that, say, once every 3 weeks. It all depends on what beer it is, what gravity you need. And you basically work it out that when we first put it in the FV, we start off with a certain gravity, and then as the yeast works in it, the gravity goes down, and that's 12 at 8. So that's 12 at 8, that one. And basically what it is, you start off with a gravity, and you end up with a gravity. You take the one from the other, and you multiply it by 0.129, and you get the actual ABV of the beer. The shives go in the top to seal the tubs, and we just mark them with a pen so we know what beer is inside the tub before it gets labelled up. And that's done. little hideaway. This is our cellar setup. All the original is in 36s on that sill. The end tire is in 36s on that sill. In the other room over there is the bumble hole. And on this small sill we've got the dark, all in 9s. The tubs that are on the floor are all ready to go on the sill as soon as there's a gap. And the bumble hole and the ciders and lagers are through this room. All the bumbles over that side, all the lagers and ciders that side. With the lagers and ciders, we've got 3 ciders down there. We've got the Blackthorn, Thatchers and Addlestons. Got the main lager, which is the Carlsberg, the Carlin. Then we got Stella Artois and we got the Guinness in these 2. They've all got their own individual pumps on the wall. Feed both rooms. It's all very sedate when it works properly.
So 1972, which is when Canberra was formed, really was when the homebrew trade in this country was at its lowest ebb. In 1872 there were 56,000 homebrew pubs. In 1972 there were 4, this being one of the 4. The other 3 being the Blue Anchor down in Cornwall, the All Nations and the 3 Tons in Shropshire. The brewing trade here increased and increased until eventually we were brewing 5 times a fortnight, which was the maximum capacity for the plant at the time. And George, the brewer, spent his time brewing and acting as drayman, sharing the stuff out between the shops. Mrs Pardoes carried on here, but of course she was getting older. And then Brenda, her daughter, took more of the load of the administration of the business, and her son-in-law Sid took over the management of the pub. It was Sid actually that made the Old Swan what it was. It was never a particularly busy pub in its earlier days, but as Sid took over it became a character. Everybody talks about Sid and still do talk about Sid. He was a gentleman, he was a publican's publican. Eventually Mrs Pardoes died in 1984 and she was taken through the front door of the pub, straight up Church Road to the parish church, to a well-attended service, and then buried in the northwest of the churchyard. We've come from the Old Swan at the bottom end of Church Road up to the parish church of St Andrew at the top end of Church Road. And one of my little jobs here is I'm organist. We'll go inside now and have a look at what a Victorian synthesizer can do. I played for my first service here in 1979. It was just before Canon Stevens retired after a 32-year ministry here. And the first service I played for was a confirmation service when my parents were confirmed, and that was quite a privilege and a joy to be able to play for that. I was appointed as organist proper in 1997, but for 20 years prior to that I'd worked as verger and attended most of the weddings, funerals and services here. From this angle we're looking at the church on the southwest side. The church was built in 1830. Church commissioners gave some of money as a remembrance or thanksgiving for the safe deliverance from the tyranny of Napoleon after the Napoleonic Wars. It's a Waterloo church. It cost £8,000 to build. When they started to dig the foundations, they found coal and clay. So they didn't throw that away. They used the clay and the coal to make the bricks, and the church is made out of the bricks that were made in the churchyard. That saved quite a little bit of money on the build, and so the first church school in Netherton was built at the other end of the church road opposite the Swan. When it was built, the church had seating capacity of 1,250. And if you look through the early records, you can see services where that sort of number of people attended, not once, but 4 or 5 times a day. This is the organ at the church. Actually, there are 3 organs here. The top keyboard is one organ, the bottom keyboard is a different organ, and the pedals are a different organ again. All the pipes of the top keyboard are controlled by these stops here. The pedals are controlled by these, and the bottom keyboard or great organ is controlled by these. You've got fluty sounds, you've got peculiar sounds, you've got loud sounds, you've got deep sounds, you've got different sounds again, and then down with your feet. But put them all together and you'll get things like